So welcome, dear friends, again. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be, maybe even good night for some of you. Welcome to RAYfest, our first online festival celebrating women of spirit. And we're welcoming friends from right around the world. Thank you so much. Some of you have been with us the whole weekend. Some of you have been popping in and out, wherever you are. We're so grateful to have you joining us in this beautiful virtual sacred space. I'm your host, Saima Daya, and together with Fatima Ashraf, we are the co-creators of Ray of God. Ray seeks to share feminine spiritual wisdom to help realize God in all ways and to align with justice, truth, and beauty. The energetic state of the feminine is our guiding principle and holds our intention. And we believe that all genders hold the feminine and masculine within themselves. While we are women-led and women-centered, we welcome and encourage all genders to join us in a safe, inclusive space, God willing. Ray does not seek to present a voice of expertise. We see ourselves as travelers along the way and learning with each step. Our ideas are constantly evolving, and we hope that you will join us on this journey to deeper consciousness. The aim of this festival is to heal, harmonize, and challenge. And our contributors will be speaking to the broad theme of her space, how women create and claim or reclaim sacred and other spaces, literally and through reshaping narratives and giving voice to their views and experience as they discover their power and agency as women. We are blessed to be welcoming over the course of this weekend. We have already welcomed so many truly diverse, intergenerational, interspiritual cohort of incredible contributors. Some of these are religious leaders, some spiritual teachers, activists, academics, creatives, and so much more. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the next collection of spiriting sheroes for this session. First of all, we have the Lady Imam and retired Professor, Dr. Amina wadud, the author of Quran and Woman and Inside the Gender Jihad. She's had almost 50 years to promote the ideas of sacred equality, human dignity, and the beauty of radical diversity through critical inclusive reading of Islamic primary sources and the lived realities of women and gender non-binary Muslims. She's descended from African slaves of Muslim origin, and she's traveled in more than 60 countries, witnessing the sacred in sublime interaction with policy and progress, and she currently resides in Indonesia. And I would just like to say, this is a third copy of this book, Quran and Woman. It's the only time that I've been okay with friends borrowing my books and not returning them. And if I could, I would give a copy of this to every imam, preacher, mullah, and watch their heads explode as they try to refute anything she says, because they can't, because she's a Quran scholar and she knows what she's talking about. So anyway, highly recommended. It's a text for so many teachers around the world and universities, and if you read it, you'll know why. So I'm sharing Amina's information. She's got a Patreon page, which I highly recommend, that you can follow, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Okay. So next we have Rabbi Dr. Jill Hammer, author, ritualist, scholar, poet, midrashist, and dreamworker. She is the director of spiritual education at the Academy for Jewish Religion and the co-founder of the Kohenet Hebrew Priestess Institute. Her new book on ancient Jewish mystical text is titled Return to the Place, the Magic, Meditation, and Mystery of 𝘚𝘦𝘧𝘦𝘳𝘠. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Jill's also the author of other books, including The Hebrew Priestess, Ancient and New Visions of Jewish Women's Spiritual Leadership, with Tyre Sher, and Jewish Book of Days, a companion for all seasons. Also Sisters of Sinai, New Tales of Biblical Women, and the Book of Earth and Other Mysteries. Now, this is a book that a lot of my friends have been holding next to us. Absolutely beautiful explanation of the different types of priestesses that we can become, and also guided meditations and visioning quests for each one as well, which are absolutely beautiful. I highly recommend. and I'm sharing Jill's information as well. And we are delighted to welcome the Reverend Marie-Elsa Bragg, who was, some of you may remember, we shared something about her during last year's retreat that we had as well. And we're delighted that she's been able to join us today. Marie-Elsa has been a spiritual director for over 20 years and is the current chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons. Her work is with, no, that's changed. Okay, well, I'll clarify that. Absolutely. Her work is with people from different walks of life, traditions, religions, and experiences of faith, whilst also dedicating part of her work to those religious orders, such as monastic orders, clergy, and the padres of the Royal Navy. She also lectures on subjects around theology, religion, tradition, ritual, interfaith, and spirituality. And her personal spirituality includes a continual interest in different traditions alongside a lifelong connection with Seninank, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I know, the Cistercian monastery local to her family in Provence, and with a local Christianity and literary tradition of my current home place, the Lake District. She's also training, or may already be, a Jungian analyst, and she's authored 2 books, Towards Melbreak and Sleeping Letters, which is currently on my prayer altar. An absolutely beautiful, devastatingly beautiful ode to grief. And that's all I can say without getting too emotional. So I highly recommend that. So thank you so much, all of you, for being with us. And let's just dive straight in. I'm going to ask the first question. And perhaps Marie-Elsa could start us off. What does the sacred feminine mean to you? And how do you see her helping us to heal, harmonize, and challenge the hegemonic worldview? Thank you, Marie-Elsa.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. You can hear me all right. Can you hear me all right? Good. I've got frozen raspberries underneath my computer to keep it nice and cool. It's really lovely to be here with you, and I can't wait to hear what everyone has to say. So thank you so much. It's very moving. This morning was very moving. How can you create a festival that's so profound and yet so intimate? Beautiful. Thank you. Divine Feminine. I suppose as I begin with my own heritage, I'm from a monastic Cistercian tradition from my mother's side, brought up, she's from Provence, so brought up with a kind of monastic movement. Silent movement is the movement that really affected me from very young. And then of course the romantic movement from my father's side, which is in the north of England in Cumbria, where it's also very mountainous. And there our tradition is very much about walking with nature and being in real relationship with nature. One of the great poets of that area, William Wordsworth, wrote the line, "One impulse from a vernal wood may teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good than all the sages can." So those walks are really about listening to God in nature and learning of morality, even from that impulse of a beautiful wood. So, and my Provençal side is all very kind of, we have a very strong artisan tradition there, so it's all about creativity and living the life of an artisan and painting and sculpting in order to be in the creative moment and capture things and being part of nature and being imagination, being part of taking life in and being full of the divine in a very creative way. So I suppose that's my cultural heritage. But then being brought up in London, I found an esoteric teacher quite young who taught something called the Kabbalah, which I'm sure everybody knows the name now. Though his version was from a teacher called Moses Cordovero, who was kind of 16th century, lived in Safed. And so it was very geometrical, beautiful tradition, and I've studied with him for 25 years. He's just died now, but he's been a big teacher of mine for a long time, and that's full of practice as well as application. And so although it's a male teacher there, his understanding of regular meditations, active imagination, really incorporated the masculine and feminine together and allowed me to put it into practice, as well as learning the texts and studying all the different worlds, the four worlds, the different levels. And that shows very much when I went to university. You can see I went to Oxford to study theology, but also just before that I did a year at 𝘗𝘏𝑵 Rabbinic College and studied Jewish festivals, Jewish mysticism, Maimonides, and different mystical texts. And I also trained with the Jesuits, which was a sort of very alive movement here in the UK. Still, it's interesting, different points in history, you have to look for what's still alive and got the kind of the spirit in it. And there they were still teaching how to lead silent retreats and what that inner process is that you would naturally go through if you go into silence. One of the interesting things about a silent retreat, an Ignatian Jesuit silent retreat, is that you can work for years with a spiritual director before you're able to go into their 30-day silent retreat, which is the one that they really kind of work towards. And that's because you don't enter into that sacred silence until you have the foundational idea of a loving God. And I think there I kind of bring my idea of the divine feminine, because of course, you know, essentially there is this one outside or containing time. I love all the different texts, the Ein Sof, or nothingness, somethingness, trying to describe that one. And everything else that comes out of that has this beautiful relationship with this wholeness. All the different worlds, the spiritual world, the psychological world, the physical world, they're all in change and relationship. And as soon as the one comes out, you have the masculine and the feminine in relationship, but still separate, because you couldn't be in a relationship otherwise. So my sense of the divine feminine, I suppose, is this sense of creative, cyclical, gestative relationship in movement and still holding a space. It's a very creative dynamic that's always reflecting something of this oneness, this holding of a seed. And in the Christian tradition, I have I'm about to go into, I'll leave you with this thought. In the Christian tradition, I'm about to go into the idea of Christmas. And one of the things I love about that is not just the idea of holding light in the dark. It's the idea, or it's the truth, this beautiful image of Mary pregnant with God. And there's never a year that goes past that I don't sit with what it is to be pregnant with God and let that soak into my being. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The words you shared about Mary being pregnant with God reminds me of words from Mevlana, who talks a lot about, you know, will you be the Mary that brings out the spirit of Jesus? Can you hold that? Thank you. And also, I hope either during this conversation or afterwards, we come back to this idea of only being able to go into the sacred silence when you know a loving God. That really strikes me, as I know a lot of friends have difficulty sitting in silence, and it's a very profound connection. So thank you so much. Jill, same question.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to say how honored I am to be here in really august company. It means a great deal to me. I really am grateful to be invited and to share with all of you. I think I first met the divine feminine, the sacred feminine, as a child in all kinds of interesting places, probably in the stories of biblical women and the picture Bible on my night table. I grew up in a basically secular Jewish home, but they had some attachment to Jewish stories that came down to me and caught my interest. But I also read lots of world myth about goddesses and heroines and prophetesses that really affected me. Some fantasy novels, actually, that probably awoke this in me. And later on, when I was really on the sense of her, of the divine feminine, I really found her in two different places, both in the mystical tradition, my own mystical tradition, the tradition of the Kabbalah, which has lots to say about the sacred feminine as that mystical tradition understands her, and also in the work of feminist poets, and particularly Jewish feminist poets who were trying to reclaim an image of God that included them, and that included what they cared about. And so sort of with these two friends, I really began to put together my own desire to see that image and that voice in my more public in my tradition. Most they don't tell you about goddess in Hebrew school. They don't tell you about they don't tell you that there's a tradition of the divine feminine in Jewish tradition. In a basic Jewish education, you only find out if you go looking for it, sort of in the corners of of scholarship. And I really have, in some ways, devoted my life to making it more not only public, but a lived experience to be in communion. And with Shekhinah, which is the word I use most for the sacred feminine. In Hebrew, Shekhinah comes from the word which means to dwell. It means the indwelling, the one who dwells within. And it's a word that gets used from the Talmudic era onward to describe the experience of God living within the physical world. That it's an aspect of the divine that is entwined with, is sort of coexistent with the universe. And I think, as someone who loved nature and my experience of nature, that was an idea that felt so resonant to me, mattered to me, that I could look at a tree or a stone and I could find God there. And I still do. I still my main meeting place with Shekhinah is Central Park. Certainly in prayer, but also on my daily walk. The birds and the lake and the stones are a place that I find God. And what's complex for me is that this image is very, very old. It's an image that the Kabbalists sort of elevated out of an even earlier biblical tradition where we hear about wisdom as the feminine. And it's also very new and feels rebellious. That to talk about Shekhinah as not just as a kind of emanation of, or a sort of side issue from the Godhead, but as a way of talking about the whole, is new, is different. And a lot of the liturgy that I work with and write, and that the community that I helped found, the Kohenet Hebrew Priestess Institute, uses, is an exercise in playing with, so what does it mean when we talk about ourselves in the feminine? What do we mean? What does it mean when we talk about God in the feminine? How does that change our experience? How does that make us more alive? So I guess what I want to close by saying is that I really love making these older ways of talking about God relevant to today. This is my latest book, and it has on it an image of the sacred feminine. This is air, water, and fire, the elements. They're described in an ancient book of mysticism called Sefer Yetzirah. That's we referred to earlier, they're the partners with God in creating the universe. And this is an image that an artist friend of mine made of them, of the elements in their partnership with the Creator to make the world. And I love celebrating them and making people look at it, because often the feminine gets shunted aside in my tradition as in others, and I want to make us look at it, and particularly because women and the earth and the feminine have been sort of co-oppressed, and now it's time for us to really pay attention to them because we need to for our own survival. So that's really become my passion, is to make this tradition alive, both because it opens our hearts and we need it, and also because we need it in order to do what we have to do next, which is take care of our earth together.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's amazing symbology there. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. And one of the things that really struck out to me, this came up yesterday as well when we were talking, is this idea of it's rebellious, and we were talking about subversive, to reclaim what has already been there, right? And that you say it's always been there, and yet almost as talk to even bring up the Shekhinah, the divine feminine, is seen as a rebellious act. Yes, thank you so much. Amina, same question.
𝘚𝘦𝘵𝘻𝘧𝘦𝘳𝘆. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. I begin, as I always begin, in the name of Allah, whose grace I seek in this and all other matters. And I just want to say my thanks for the opportunity to talk about the ways in which the divine feminine has become meaningful to me. I was raised on a loving male God through my loving father, a Methodist minister. Then I became Buddhist, and I acquainted myself with a unified, transcendent, ultimate reality. This personal history sets up a meaningful, intimate relationship with the sacred for the purpose of creating harmony in the creation. That includes especially humans. Amongst humans, I learned early in life as a Black woman that some experience discrimination for reasons of race, class, gender, sexuality, ability, religion, place of origin, languages, and the way they are used or misused, etc. I needed a sacred system to help me negotiate this and to help steer my path through life to resist hegemony and as a champion of inclusivity. I found that in the Islamic postulate of Tawheed, that not only affirms a sacred unity of the ultimate reality, but also extends to create an ethical location vis-a-vis differences in our human body forms and types. This Tawhidic paradigm explicitly regulates the kind of relationship we must have with others on this planet. We must respond to them as we would ourselves wish to be responded to. I call it horizontal reciprocity. For at least a decade, I found this the answer to my questions and to my quest in life. And then something changed. I recognized that I had come to this transcendent gender non-specific designation of the divine through all my masculine notions of God, even if in a loving way. So I endeavored to revisit this same goal, the goal of unity, inclusion, and affirmation intentionally through the divine feminine. In Islamic thought, we say that God has 99 names or attributes. Some of them are masculine, Jalal, and some of them are feminine, Jamal. Yet Allah is beyond gender binary, neither male nor female, but both. And yet, when we say she with reference to Allah, people respond as if we've said something wrong, but they do not respond to he, as if we have equally said something wrong. Again, to me, this means that Allah has both masculine and feminine, And the feminine has experienced an historical, that is, people-based decentralization. To overcome this sidelining of the feminine, I felt the call to enhance the awareness, experience, and affirmation of the divine feminine as a way to sacred unity. I've decided that that will be my journey from here till the end. Hope you will join me. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Thank you so much. I'd just like to share that your Talmudic paradigm model, traditionally it's always God, man, woman. And then some people kind of, flattened it out to God, man, God, woman. But what was so profound for me was how you talked about the horizontal reciprocity, that knowing God is between the man and the woman, constantly with God too, that it's always a relationship of three, which is actually one and unity. So thank you so much. So I'll move into the second question. So ritual, altars, and a connection to the land is something that seems to be important to all of you. And how have you claimed or reclaimed ritual in your tradition? And what new meanings have been unveiled to you, if any? And perhaps we could open with Jill for this one.
So ritual has always felt like a transformative force to me. And what's particularly, what matters about ritual in the work that I do now is that although text study and spiritual leadership was not always open to everybody and not always open to women, there was always a ritual happening for everyone, right? Not only the sanctioned ritual that was happening publicly, but all kinds of ritual. And so some of what the Kohenet Institute does is to look at sources of ritual, right, that are called folk sources, right, that often means they're women's ritual, right, or they're ritual made by non-scholars, and we elevate those sources of ritual. So that's one thing that we do. We look at the making of soul candles by Eastern European Jewish women, or the salt, the salt healing magic that's done by Sephardic women, and we sort of elevate those rituals, and we think about how do we use these as models for our own ritual lives. So that's an important piece. Another piece that matters to me is looking at ancient ritual for how our own ritual today can become more embodied, because at least in my sort of American Jewish tradition, the last generation did a lot of things that were very much in the head. So there's a lot of work as to how to re-embody ourselves, how to sort of reconnect to the heart and the body. And so some of that is around making ritual more sensual, more more full of the senses, with music and sacred objects. So I just thought I'd share in the little time I have some photographs. So this is me with an altar in Central Park. My father made these candlesticks for me. He was a woodworker. This is the copper bowl that we use at the center of our Kohenet ritual space, which echoes the copper bowl that was donated by women to the copper mirrors to make the washing bowl in the temple. And this is recorded in the book of Exodus. So this is a ritual object that encodes that gift of the mirrors of the women who were shrine keepers there. Here's an altar for the prophetess Miriam, representing her energy of water and music. This is from a Passover retreat in Costa Rica. And I'll show you one more. This is from a first fruits ritual done in Connecticut, in Falls Village, Connecticut, at a Jewish retreat center. They have a farm. And although for thousands of years we haven't been doing the harvest, the harvest offerings that were made in the time of the temple, this community reclaims those rituals And we do a procession, and we bring the first fruits of the harvest, and this is the altar that was spontaneously made during that ritual. And often when people walk into our space who are accustomed to a more traditional Jewish space, there's either complete joy, like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this my whole life, you know, for the sacred to be embodied at the center of our prayer circle. And other people who are like, I must be in the wrong room. You know, there's just a sort of visceral reaction of either this is it, this is the thing, or this is different from what I'm used to. This makes me uncomfortable. So I'm always sort of tracking that for some people, as ritual gets more embodied, they get more nervous, and for other people, it's very exciting. So that's a little bit about the ways we've also worked with life cycle ritual and rituals for aging and for birth and things that historically there are rituals for, but often not canonized ones. And we also created a prayer book with liturgy for the sacred in the sacred feminine, and we include a lot of new prayers and poems related to the feminine, to the earth, to the body, and to contemporary, to liberation and anti-oppression, and to contemporary concerns. So that's a little bit about how our community reclaims ritual. And for me, I find ritual has actually become something very simple and private. Like I can go out on a walk and stop at a particular tree every day, and that becomes my ritual of prayer. So I love the sense of big community ritual. I love to be part of rituals where there are big processions and torches and lots of drama. But I also really value the privacy of ritual and the way that ritual makes a space for us to suddenly feel that we're part of something larger than ourselves.
Thank you so much, Jill. That's beautiful to see those pictures. Marie-Elsa, same question.
Oh, those pictures were gorgeous. Thank you. So for me, ritual is, to say it's a big part of my life is an understatement. It's how life works, really. And I mean, as a priest, all my work is in that sort of wordless space, where people can have hundreds of different understandings of, or places that they are relating to God from, or understandings of their relationship with God, or doubt, and still all held within this beautiful ritual that might be going on. And it could be even just, when I'm visiting someone and we want to do the prayers before and after, or light a candle, or it could be, the beautiful doula, and I use that word, midwife, body washing that you would do when someone has died, anointing and body washing, which is an incredibly beautiful ritual. So I would say that I feel that ritual really sort of holds a sacred space. And there was a really brave question this morning about sexuality, and I feel I want to just address that for me, reclaiming sexuality is about reclaiming the sacred space of sexuality. And with that comes the divine understanding that on some level, all our relationships are this God-given ritual. So I suppose there's that side of it that I feel I want to share, and the idea also of the Eucharist. That my second book has the ritual of the Eucharist meticulously described as you would do it as a priest, so that the reader can stand in the place of priest. But what's been interesting is that people have responded to it because it was about, I was thinking about my mother, it was about letters to my mother, and it was about my relationship with God, my relationship with Christ. And therefore all the imagery for this one time of the intricate details of the Eucharist are feminine. And the question, oh, does that mean you think God is a woman? So there's so many masculine imagery. Why not feminine imagery? And there it is, very is very palpable for me. Christ is Mother and Father God. Christ is the unity of inner masculine and feminine, which I like to just define the difference between our inner masculine and feminine and man and woman. So, because we have the masculine and feminine within us all. But I do feel that I want to just somehow also be honest with you about some of the pain that I've had with ritual, because becoming a female priest was an incredible gift from God and from my community. And I knew that becoming a priest was becoming a female priest. But it was also the praying for the grace to have the courage to step into those shoes. When I was ordained, there were no women's clothes. I was ordained in a man's shirt. I was asked to cut my hair and wear a suit. And the first wave of women before me had done that, because it was the only thing that they could do to find any kind of place. But I didn't have that kind of strength. So I went away and I thought with my great Auntie Margaret, what on earth will I do? And we tried to think very much of an archetype of a female that would have integrity in the culture that I would be serving in. We suddenly thought suffragettes. So we scraped my hair into a bun, found a waistcoat in the local Oxfam shop, bought some very long material and made a kind of cassock skirt. And I turned up and we got a jacket and took in the waist. And I turned up at St. Paul's to be ordained, much to people's shock, in a very long skirt with my hair in a bun. But I could see that something in them slightly recognised a kind of strength. There was some kind of history. There's something very important about having women's shoes to stand in, having an ancestral mark. You know, in that way, my first placement, I was told that, yes, I could read the New Testament things, but I wasn't able to. It was High Anglican Church, so you would sing the gospel, but I couldn't sing the gospel because a woman's voice didn't have the gravitas to sing the gospel. Or there were many other things that I had to sort of weather. And one of the things that I would like to say that is because I just come from some big conference about equality for women and women being bishops, and I was in a group of women who were working with Parliament, and I stopped by Westminster Abbey and I went into the chapel of Edward the Confessor, and you know, Elizabeth I is buried there. She's written some beautiful prayers, and she wouldn't let them get rid of the shrine there, even though it was Catholic, because she had such a devotional space for it. So, and if you think about the Reformation, it was very dangerous for her to protect that space, but its nickname is the Veil of Heaven. And I went there and I prayed for strength and courage and to be worthy and to be of service. And I imagined for a moment angels at the gate of heaven. And to my shock and horror, I realized that those images were of male angels, and that I had just as much of this patriarchy in me, that I was going to have to do as much inner work on myself if I was going to have real negotiations and real conversations with people. I was going to have those conversations with myself as well. So I think when I look at Seema and Fatima with their red and white roses representing Mary Magdalene and Mary, the Mother of God, the Virgin and the whore, the pull that we have between us about how to really relate to human beings in their full divine image of God. I think that symbolism, creativity, imagination, music, word, story, divine word, prayer, all of these things are part of this feminine and masculine spirituality that we're talking about working together, that we bring the whole of our humanity into talking about how to build a better future. So my experience of ritual is real. It holds me in life. It helps me serve. And it makes me look at the things that I need to see.
Thank you, Marie-Elsa. Thank you. Amina Jan.
I have come to increased and enhanced understandings about sacred actions in personal ritual. I'm also intensely interested in symbols. Symbols and their meanings are constructed in time and place, always. In one place, they may hold intense sacred meaning, and in another place, they may seem to be just random items, tokens, even superstitious. That is because everyday ordinary items hold or are imbued with meaning through the ways in which they are held as reflectors or signs. In Arabic, we say ayat for the singular or ayat for the plural. Ayat that point to the ultimate realities. I found in the past decade that I have developed a habit of token manipulation in more details and with greater repetition. The inspiration for keeping an altar, in my case, a living altar, one which I add fresh blossoms to daily, and which I clear each new moon, and then I reset anew in different order to create different configurations about the intentional inclusion of the four elements: air, water, earth, and fire. I symbolize these with feathers, shells, crystals, stones, and on occasion, lighted candles and incense. In addition, I acknowledge my sacred lineage, my teachers, and my ancestors with items like photographs, a Celtic cross, or the baobab tree. I also extend beyond my generation through my grandchildren. I share grandparentage with white, Christian, Jewish, Latinx, Black, Muslim, and Chinese. Therefore, I include intentionally sacred symbols that are beyond just Islamic ones. For example, I have a hand of Fatima, which I picked up in Jerusalem, that has the Hebrew letters spelling out the name of my grandson, which is Chaim, meaning life. I should mention that my first and most intimate inspiration to keeping an altar were my two eldest daughters. They taught me how to celebrate my identity as an eclectic Muslim. Furthermore, in my personal practice, I give as much attention to daily meditation as I do to Muslim daily ritual prayer performance. In other words, I move towards the divine in as many ways as I am comfortable, in as many ways as I'm comfortable with, and I no longer restrict myself to just the formulas of other Muslim times and locations. Since I am now way closer to the grave than I am to the cradle, I have decided to enter that abode with as much love and light as I can muster on this side, and that has opened up my worship, my sense of sacred symbols, and my participation in them both.
Thank you so much. I'd just actually like to share that it's through hearing Amina talk about altars, which I never really saw as a Muslim thing, you know, when I was still constrained in definitions, that I started exploring this. And so I'm trying to do them. And Fatima and I did intentionally make our altars, and various friends did, and we'll be sharing pictures of that on our page later. But I have a stone that my husband got me when he went walking, because I'm not really able to get out as much, and actually while he was swimming. And to me, I never thought about stones on my altar, and that just came from Amina sharing in her Patreon post. So thank you so much. And I'm learning to build my altars intentionally and personally and connect to them. So thank you. So, my goodness, moving into the third question. So titles have historically been assigned to men or are gendered. How do you claim your title and what does it mean to you? And I'm going to ask the lady Imam herself to open this one up.
So, excuse me. So I want to tell a little story, how I came to own the title, the Lady Imam. As a Black woman, I have been called by many names or titles. Some titles feel comfortable and others do not fit. I'm no longer shy to say when they do not fit. People who do not know me get offended by this assertion. I've had people just stop all communication with me when I make a point about my title preference, or even to insist that I spell my name without capital letters. My mother had only an 8th grade education, and when my father died in his 40s, she had to use her domestic skills in order to find employment. My father had insisted that she only fulfill the roles of housekeeper, mother, and wife. When she went to work and became mistress of her own fate, she still, as a Black woman and a domestic servant, had to be addressed by people who undermined the respect she was due, if only by age. I was raised to never call a woman about the age of my mother, that is someone who is about that age, by her first name, especially Black women. We add Ms. in front of their first name, Miss Nancy or Miss Susan. When I became Muslim, I learned that this was almost a universal habit, with the expectation that women are sisters to each other. So those who are younger use the word auntie, or they use the word uncle, and it's quite common. And they also use it in different languages, not just in English. As a professor, a doctor, a PhD, etc., I noticed that in professional settings, men are often acknowledged with their titles and women are not. By the way, I'm invited to a conference that's going to be held in the next couple of weeks, and I'm the only person whose name is there without title. The others have multiple titles, doctor and professor, and some have PhDs afterwards. At this point, I feel like it's a useless point to point it out to them, but in the final program, if this persists, I intend to address it when I am present. This seems like they are being more on friendly terms with women, but really, it's just another way of undermining our achievements. So as a Muslim woman in the public space, I lay claim to my self-naming. I do not spell my name with capital letters, although for most of the years since I chose my name, I allowed others to write my name as they saw fit or according to other rules. Then I started insisting on the spelling of my choice. Lastly, I want to say something about titles used for Muslim women who function in roles of leadership. I prefer not to be addressed by the feminine version of male names. It's very common for women to be called sheikha. And the word sheikh literally is the word that means an old man, but figuratively, it is imbued with honorific ideas like wise, elder, or leader. But the word in Arabic for old woman is ajuz, and it carries the meaning of frailty, deficiency, and weakness. How is it that one gets old and gets better and the other gets old and gets worse, except that naming is important? Thus, I call myself the Lady Imam, which is an anglicized version and a female affirmed way of doing it. Instead of saying imama, which is the feminized Arabic, I say the Lady Imam. In fact, it cannot be translated into Arabic, and I'm not an Arab. I am a lady who has accepted to act in the role of Imam, the prayer leader, which is not specified to gender until I attach lady in front of it. So that is my naming.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love telling people that, yeah, I'm going online to listen to the Lady Imam. And they're like, what? What's that? Thank you so much. Marie-Elsa?
Naming. Well, yeah, I had a job for a while, part-time job as the chaplain to the padres of the Royal Marines, Royal Navy, Royal Marines, just in their retreat centres, I think it was about two years. And there, men or women of the cloth ordained are all called padres. So I experienced being called hello father, which was interesting because the name has been used for so many generations. It has become the idea of a chaplain, but you still know it's father. But when I went to my parish in Kilburn, which is just in a sort of part of London where there are lots of estates, and I was there for 6 years. They had a very Anglo-Catholic tradition, so the priest who was there before me, they called him father, and I was part of a team, and they were all very adamant that because the history of the use of the term father comes from monastic orders, and so they were all very adamant that they wanted to call me mother. So for a few years, I got used to being called, they used to call me Mother Elsa instead of Marie-Elsa, Mother Elsa. And for a while, it used to, interestingly, evoke motherhood in me, which I had to really be careful of, because if I start identifying with being a priest rather than holding the place of priesthood for the other person, then I'm not doing my job. So it took a while for the word mother to then get this sort of sense of different sacred use to it, before I became accustomed to that title. And now it's funny, actually, if I'm not wearing my uniform, I walk down the street, lots of people just don't recognize me. But if I'm wearing my uniform, it'll be, Mother Elsa, and I'm able to, the kids all run up to me, and I'm able to embrace them without feeling that I'm giving of my own personal family motherhood, that I'm able to really stand there, because pastoral love, as you all know, is a real love. I mean, you really love. It's extraordinary. You can feel the grace loving with you, and it's a particular love for so many people, and yet so incredibly individual and intimate at the same time. It's amazing. Such an honour. So that's my two experiences of naming. But it's quite interesting also, another thing I would say is that historically the word priest and vicar are two different words, and people will say to me, would I call you a vicar or a priest? Well, the word vicar, vicare, comes from when Christianity was sort of taken into the Roman Empire, and different districts were split up into dioceses, and they all had vicari looking after them, and that was nothing to do with any spiritual order. Or so I just feel no resonance with that word at all. even though, you know, if I was to be practically looking after a parish and trying to work out how to pay for the roof to be fixed and work out the PCC and go to synod and be part of those things, I understand that it's very much part of an institution. I can sort of see the vicariate side of that, but actually I feel that a lot of my job is to be worldly, understand all those things need to be done, but keep priesthood. And so I'm as, you know, generously as I can, and I feel that I need to learn from Amina, but I'm quite careful when I say no. I'm a priest. I want to become a priest, and when I say that word, that I'm a priest, I'm aware that I haven't. Whether I should reclaim or not the word priestess is a really interesting question, because it has such a big history of other traditions, and I nearly became a nun in the Cistercian order, so I know what it's like to be a woman in the Christian order. But I would say that when I say the word priest as a title, what I feel is a sense of this kind of ancient footprint that's part of, you know, that's gone into the desert and sat for 40 days. That is a seed, and I feel this sort of ancient, humble presence, and I'm just walking in the desert alongside someone else, humbly walking in the desert behind me, and there are many who will be walking in the desert in front of me. And I feel this strong sense of just the humble rhythm of surrender and loyalty and a real belief in worldly love.
Thank you so much, Marie-Elsa. Beautifully connects to Jill, who has reclaimed priestess, so really interested to hear about this. Please do go ahead, Jill.
So I feel called to tell a story, which is that the day before my ordination as a rabbi, I went walking in the park and I sat under a tree, and I'd worked very hard to achieve this title. I had been in rabbinical school for 6 years, and I had fought with lots of my professors, and it had been a really intense time of learning and identity change. And I sat under this tree and I realized that this was not exactly the title I wanted. And that even though I was going to receive the title rabbi, and I continue to be really honored that I carry that title in the lineage of rabbinic Judaism, that it was a title that assumed certain things about what mattered and about who had gotten to make the rules up until that point. And so while I was grateful to be receiving it, I felt incomplete. And really that ordination became a journey for me into, if I feel this way, something, you know, and maybe others feel this way, we got to do something about it. And when I met 𝘚𝘦𝘧𝘦𝘳𝘠 Shir, my co-founder of the Kohenet Hebrew Priestess Institute, we began talking about with each other this desire to have a lineage, like the lineage of rabbi, that went back, that you know, that wasn't that we could reconceive as unbroken. You know, and a lineage that would include women and the spiritual leaders who had not until that point been included. And so we had to choose a word, like, what are we going to call this thing? And we knew that the English translation was priestess, but we knew that it had to be called something in Hebrew. And we picked the word Kohenet, which means priestess in Hebrew, which doesn't appear in the Hebrew Bible, although it does appear on the gravestones of priestesses just across the border in Phoenicia. You see the word Kohenet. So they knew about this word. It's the feminine of Kohen, which means priest. And so through that word that we picked, which was really, you know, again, a word that, you know, hadn't been used for that purpose, and that certainly some people felt we shouldn't use for that purpose, but that we picked it because of the history and our desire to claim this, you know, that these marginalized you know, prophetesses and shrine keepers had been part of something that was larger than them, that was a service that extended beyond them and was passed down through time. And so that was the title we picked, and that's the title with which we ordain the people that come through our doors. And we also ask each of them to pick their own title. So that is specific to their calling and the work that they do, because we really wanted to name that each of us brings a different message and a different blessing into the world. And so people pick things like one who circle maker, or the one who keeps the hidden fire, or a weaver of community. So that became a practice. They take a year to choose what this title will be. And I want to share that when we ordained our first class, there was a conversation about whether the teachers would also be ordained, because no one had ever ordained us as Kohenot, as Hebrew priestesses. And so after a lot of back and forth, our students decided that they would ordain us as their teachers. And I received from them the title Rav Kohenet, which is an ancient title from a gravestone in Phoenicia that means high priestess. And it is the title of the teachers in our program, and I carry it very proudly because it comes from my students. And it means a lot to me that although I didn't get that from the generation before me, I was able to receive it from my community. And I want to share a picture again of myself at a smicha, at an ordination ceremony of the Kohenot, because I feel that it speaks for me more than I can about how I evolved from being a rabbi. And I want to say I am so I honor so much those women who worked to become rabbis and cantors in the Jewish tradition, and who teach and who pray in that tradition. But I want to share this picture that somebody caught as we were lining up to go into the tent where the ritual would take place. And this is the picture, and you can see that I'm walking in a line with all of these amazing beings who became priestesses that day. And I want to say that when I first saw this picture, I really burst into tears, because years ago I had a dream of walking in a line of women wearing white up a mountain. When I saw this dream, when I saw the picture, I thought, this is the dream. I have found a way to live into the dream. So it's been an interesting journey, sort of working this title into the Jewish community as a whole, because this has not been a clergy role up until this point. And when people ask us, what does this title mean? We say that it's not the same as the titles that have come before, but it offers us something new and something that we need.
Thank you, Jill, so much for sharing that beautiful picture and the dream behind it. So we have questions coming through. We have 3 so far, which I think might take us to the end. We'll start with, just check. Fozia, you'd like to, let me just. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you all. Incredibly, my heart's just cracked wide more. It's been an incredible experience just to even listen. I briefly just wanted to say that I have this incredible coherence and an awareness of gender when I'm having my conversation with the divine sustainer, and everything is just beautifully flowing. Where I struggle a bit is going into group situations and feeling intimidated and almost in awe that there's this incredible female energy striving up to, contribute, and I kind of lose my voice a bit. And I guess maybe I was just wondering if you had any words of guidance just to, maybe I'm the quiet activist in the corner, or, you know, wanting to balance and honor both. So yeah, that was really the question, just if you had any guidance on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fawzia Jan. So just be mindful that we've got 3 questions currently, Fawzia's first one and 2 more to come. So if people would like to, if you'd like to decide which one, if you'd like to answer this one, a couple of moments perhaps.
Maybe we could get all 3 and that way we could then speak.
Yeah, we can do that. Yep. So let me, I've been asked to read the second question. So let me just come back to it. So we've heard a lot this weekend about how stepping into our authenticity helps others around us feel comfortable to step into their own authenticity. I would love to hear how you observe the sacred feminine awakening in the men around you. So that's the second one. And then the third one is Rabia. Rabia, I'm just going to ask you to unmute.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for such yeah, awe-inspiring, incredible, beautiful contributions. And I just really wanted to raise the dilemma because, you know, Amina, the name and the naming situation, because I was so moved, Amina, by your sharing about the importance of knowing the feminine through the feminine and not just through the masculine. And so the importance of calling God she, because on that horizontal plane of reciprocity, it does something, and I really respect that. And then there are other times when I kind of cringe when there's a talk of the goddess. And I was also really struck by what Marie-Elsa said about her relationship to being called Mother Mary, you know, Mother Mary, or to being called priest, because I always feel in this huge dilemma about this, because I worry that although I know the necessity of she on the horizontal plane, I worry that it feeds into the same duality. And how do we really do this activism and the real work, the real painful work that's needed on the horizontal level, and really keep in mind and in spirit the unification and the unity really behind the masculine and the feminine. So I just wanted to share that, and thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you, Rabia Jan. Amina Jan, would you like to kick off with whichever ones you'd like to answer, and then we can work our way through?
Because Arabic was a required component for my desire to have firsthand capabilities with Quranic interpretation, I realized that it took me some time to loosen some of the literalism that comes with a language that is divided by gender. Not all languages, for example, Bahasa Indonesia has only one pronoun. And so they really get it when I say that she is just a pronoun and he is just a pronoun, and neither one of them limit God. But I can say this, including, I think, the question about, you know, claiming your voice. Sometimes these things take time. But actually, I learned from a Jewish woman, maybe like, I want to say 12 or so years ago, when we were working at the idea of women as imams for mixed gender prayer in Islam, you know, and she basically just said, you know, after a while they get used to it. So there's something to be said about persisting in times when it is tough, because then later it will settle into the familiar. I don't use the term goddess, and I often very rarely use the term God because of their associations with each other. because the Arabic word Allah is a special form of a word that cannot have a feminine ending and cannot be made plural, which is very rare in Arabic. And so it allows for there to be the notion of the ultimate, and I tend to stick with that. But because I do textual analysis, I understand the necessity sometimes of evoking an epistemological understanding of what is both a spiritual and a political movement towards the inclusion. And that's the last thing that I will say in terms of, men and the feminine. I believe, like has been said here already, that we all have masculine and feminine. And so masculine and feminine should not mean male and female. And when we're stuck at that place, we unnecessarily participate in a binary which binds people. And that's why there are now people, myself included, who identify as non-binary. So just remember that feminine is the receptive, or in Arabic, the jamal or the beauty, and that masculine is in fact the active, or as the Jalal expresses, a kind of sense of assertion and oneness. Rather than to say that they belong to female and male, which I think might be why it seems that it would be a question even for some men. So.
Thank you so much, Amina. Jill, would you like to speak to any of those questions?
Sure, I think I would like to say two things. The first is that one of the things that we often say that we train people in when we, when my co-teachers and I teach, is that we train people in becoming present, and that's the most important skill for spiritual leadership work. And I think that that's been what has strengthened my own voice, is the practice of simply becoming present. And then having the sense of whether the voice is needed or not needed, and not all priestessing is done with a with the voice. So that's the first thing I would say, that discipline of practicing paying attention to what is unfolding in the moment, to me, has been the most important skill. And that shades into the second thing I want to say, which is becoming present also means being aware of what the pressures around you are, right? And how you want to deal with those pressures. I remember the first time that I was in a community where I heard the word goddess for the first time used in prayer, as opposed to in a textbook or something like that. And for me, what it did was to cause me to realize the way that I had invisible boundaries around how I could see God, and to think about how those boundaries had been put there. And for me, there was a moment of, well, what would happen if I didn't treat that wall as a wall and I just went through it? Then what would happen? What would God look like then? So for me, what's important is not what name or what pronoun we use, but that we become aware of the, of the walls, visible or invisible, that have been put around the ways that we see God in each other. And then to find the most authentic way we can to live without walls, and that's different for everyone.
Thank you so much, Jill. Marie-Elsa?
Oh gosh, it's hard to follow that. I'm thinking about what everyone said now. It's yes, boundaries. So important. I think reclaiming the feminine within ourselves and striding out into the world has to be, in some way, that living that affirmation that you have, being allowed to grow as the babe, the little girl, the beautiful blossoming teenager, the young woman, the the woman who has grown and grown through life and becomes an elder. All those phases, and as adults we can return to and find the nurturing that allows us to become more and more who we are. And religions, at their best, help us do that. And within that is the boundary of being the beloved. Being the person who is always surrounded by God and is loved, truly loved by God. That's your boundary. And in that is a vigilance. Is this a safe place for me to be in? Is it not a safe place? Am I of service? Am I not of service? How do I really feel? Have I been programmed to sit in places that are uncomfortable as a woman? And, you know, as Jill so vividly said, maybe that's all I need to go through. How do I feel? How does my body feel? How does my intuition feel? What prayers might help me quietly in the back of my head? So there's those things. And what Amina talked about, what she talked about, the idea of letting things settle, reminds me very much of the sense of legacy. You know, we're still pioneering. Men and women together, we're still pioneering to be able to really be ourselves, men and women, both masculine and feminine within ourselves. And because of that, we need to watch how we feel and understand that we're laying a place for the people who are coming after us. There's been times when the church was exempt from the 1967 Sexual Discrimination Act in the UK. It's a little legal place of its own. And so I was able to go in meetings where my friends in the UK who are lawyers or solicitors or would have legal rights about being a woman, I was allowed to go into meetings with 30 men who were against female ordination, who believed I should only be at home having children, who would be able to say that to my face, look at me with utter hatred, even though they were priests, and ask me to leave. And the only thing I had left was to say, no, I'm staying. And the only thing that would help me stay, well, many things, but two things I will tell you. Number one, don't get used to stress. Watch for it, learn what it feels like. There might be a certain amount that you need to do because of service, but don't get used to it. That's what leads to burnout. Number two is remember all those incredible women who have worked before you, who've enabled you to even go to the place that you're going to, because they're standing right behind you always. And I just want to answer that question, who may or may not have been from a man, that it's really important for women to find spaces to empower themselves and find a voice, fill in invisible history of all different cultures and different ways of being women. But it's also really important for men to do that too, because this patriarchy has oppressed both. And I know from my work and from my friends, that also men accepting their feminine part, being allowed to participate with children or their emotions, becoming more overtly devotional, wanting to have family and community in the workplace, changing the way the business world sees things, changing our idea of money, of economy, of what really matters in the world. That's men and women working together. There's no point in anyone growing to become an honorary patriarch. We're all working together. But I understand that there are times when men need to go off and be with men, and women need to go off and be with women, and then we have to meet and share what we're doing, and also meet. So yeah, I think we profoundly affect each other, and we forget that at our parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Elsa and Jill and Amina. That was beautiful. I just want to say to the question that Fawzia asked about the voice. It was touched upon in the session before by Robin and the other speakers, but I get that, right? As people maybe surprised to hear, but yeah, you know, intimidating and overwhelming to use your voice, and the shaking comes in and then the shame starts to come through, but you just have to say no, just stand. And if you're surrounded by friends who will hold you in that and really see you and really hear you and work through the struggles, what a blessing that is. And we're just so grateful that we have access to these wonderful contributors who are not just the women who are standing behind us, who have gone before, but you're standing here with us. And so very grateful for that. Thank you for all that you've shared and taught.
And we're very grateful to women like you and Fatima, who create these incredibly beautiful places for us to all join together. So we're all a big team. And it's wonderful. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So this is a wonderful opportunity now to just rest in what's being shared. And then Marie-Elsa and then Jill are going to share something devotional, whatever comes to their hearts. And we'll sit in that for a few moments, and then we'll close with some music. So please, both of you in your own time as you wish. Marie-Elsa first and then Jill. Okay, so Jill, after a few moments, please do lead away.
So this is a chant that we sometimes use in my community in the morning. And the words are, 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing this day. And then there are a few other words which you'll pick up as we go along. Actually, maybe I can put them in the chat. Here we are. So that people can join along. And this is by 𝘗𝘦𝘵𝘻𝘪𝘳𝘢. Kohenet 𝘗𝘦𝘵𝘻𝘪𝘳𝘢. 𝘗𝘭𝘏𝘏, thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing all we do and all we say. Thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing where we go and where we stay. Thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing this day. 𝘗𝘭𝘏, thank you for blessing how we be and how we pray. Thank you for blessing this day. Thank you for blessing this day. Thank you for blessing this day.
This is a very, very old prayer that you traditionally say on a retreat before you go to sleep. You join together, you sing these songs, this prayer, and then after that silence is kept so that you go into your dream space. So I'm going to sing it for you in the way that I do when I'm on retreat. Love us, O Lord, while waking, and guard us while sleeping, that awake we may walk with Christ, and asleep we may rest in peace. Keep me as the apple of your eye,